Hello everyone. Today, we will address an issue that has always puzzled analysts and legal experts. What is the relationship between former President Trump and Russia? Why is its significance consistently placed at the forefront of the US presidential administration, as if there is a mystery behind it? Moreover, Donald Trump is renowned for his presidency marked by surprises and unpredictability. Many wonder what remains unknown about him. Like all US presidents, there is a gap between the image they wish to present to the world and the tumultuous reality within the White House. Former President Trump is no exception. Alongside the rosy pictures he seeks to paint, there undoubtedly exists a secret and unexplained portrait of him yet to be unveiled. Throughout his 4-year tenure, President Trump always kept people guessing. So, what secrets lie behind this non-political, unorthodox leader that historians want to rediscover about Donald Trump's presidency? It will undoubtedly take a great deal of time and effort to understand the unprecedented nature of a businessman president, bearing a destiny marked by significant ups and downs. Donald Trump was elected President of the United States in 2016 with a significant advantage as a successful businessman possessing a vast wealth of assets. However, he did not adhere to the commitment of disclosing his tax and personal finances, as other presidential candidates have done. The New York Times even conducted a groundbreaking investigation into the tax history of the Donald Trump family and his complex relationship with the German Deutsche Bank. Many questions have been raised about Trump's business career, including the precise extent of Donald Trump's wealth and whether it aligns with the claims about his family's past and current international business dealings. How much could Trump's 2 business roles have boosted his profits, as previous presidents had done? President Trump left his mark during his 4-year tenure with the slogan "America First." However, his policies often placed Russia at the forefront. Why? This question once again became maddeningly relevant after the New York Times first disclosed information about Russian military intelligence allegedly providing bounties to the Taliban to kill US troops in Afghanistan. According to the newspaper, these bounty payments could have been a contributing factor to the deaths of American soldiers. A typical president would likely have cancelled his Gulf trip and made a strong statement, promising a response if these allegations were confirmed. However, that wasn't the case with President Trump. Instead, he attacked the media and denied that the intelligence community had informed him about their findings. Some argue that it was hard to believe anything from a president who had publicly lied over 19,000 times. The US government is reported to have had this information since January 2020, and the National Security Council even debated how to handle the issue. During that time, President Trump and his Russian counterpart, Mr. Vladimir Putin, had at least 5 phone conversations and issued a joint statement praising the spirit of alliance cooperation to commemorate and show respect for the meeting between American and Soviet soldiers on April 25, 1945. Furthermore, President Trump proposed that President Putin bring Russia back into the group of leading industrialized nations, the G7, and also assessed their great friendship, as John Bolton, former National Security Advisor to President Trump, commented in his memoir. Currently, Mr. Putin believes he could cooperate with Mr. Trump like dealing with a pushover. There is a long narrative of Trump always dancing to Putin's tune. President Trump rebutted allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 US election and often redirected focus to Ukraine instead. He expressed solidarity with his counterpart Putin at the US-Russia summit in Helsinki in 2018. The Trump administration imposed sanctions on Russia for various reasons, nearly all of which took place despite opposition or at least complaints from President Trump himself. In major international relationships, President Trump showed respect, but also a firm stance towards other authoritarian leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. However, it was a completely different story when it came to President Putin. Trump never had the same difficult and tense exchanges with the Kremlin's chief as he did with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. Why was that? Observers argue that President Trump's favoritism towards Russia was likely driven by personal interests rather than national interests. National Security Advisor John Bolton stated, "I had to conclude that virtually any decision he made regarding my advice and his relations with other countries was guided by his re-election prospects." It's possible that financial considerations were also at play, with President Trump and his sons boasting about earnings from Russians and pursuing a Moscow building deal during the 2016 election campaign. However, Trump always kept his financial matters secretive, so whether or not there were financial deals between President Trump and Russia remains known only to him. Public speculation suggests that President Trump might not have become the President of the United States without Russian interference. Surely, President Trump was aware of this and vehemently denied it. He consistently emphasized that allegations of Russian interference were a hoax in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, which investigated suspicious ties with Russia during the 2016 presidential election. The unverified portions clearly indicated before their release on WikiLeaks, a website that previously published thousands of emails related to US military and intelligence activities. Instead of notifying the FBI, President Trump's spokesperson, Roger Stone, informed Mr. Trump. Immediately, Mr. Trump nodded in agreement with the story that evening. "Google cannot investigate further because I refused to cooperate." Meanwhile, President Trump praised Roger Stone highly. John F. Harris, a commentator for Politico, argued that, while Special Counsel Robert Mueller could not prove that President Trump conspired with Russia in the 2016 election, it doesn't mean Moscow's election interference allegations are just a hoax, as the president often says. Meanwhile, Peter Baker, a New York Times correspondent who has written books on the presidencies of George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, asserted that Mueller's investigation was crucial in clarifying the relationship between Trump and Russian President Putin. Harris, the commentator, argues that there are many questions on this issue that need clarification, such as why Russia orchestrated cyberattacks on Hillary Clinton's email and engaged in social media propaganda to benefit Trump, or why Trump, after being elected, fired those who took notes of meetings with Putin. Writing in The New Yorker, commentator Jeffrey Toobin assesses, "We know that President Trump was willing to sacrifice national interests for Russia, but we don't understand why. Even special advisors don't grasp the deep origins of President Trump's special relationship with Putin and with Russia." In the current backdrop of intensifying and potentially decades-long US-China competition, Russia appears to have more maneuverability and stands to achieve at least some of its political objectives in its neighboring countries vis-à-vis Moscow. The prolonged competition between the two economic superpowers, the US and China, works in Russia's favor as it positions Russia as an alternative political attraction. Just as China and the US view Russia as both a partner and a rival, for Russia, China and the US have long been formidable political adversaries on equal footing. The Kremlin doesn't trust the White House, nor does it trust Beijing, and naturally, the US-China competition will bring benefits to Russia. The scale of the US-China competition is increasingly comprehensive across all dimensions. However, the Russian political worldview remains intact, avoiding direct involvement and rivalry with the US-China duo. Instead, they seek to capitalize on this backdrop to gain advantages and assert political power. Their ultimate goal is to make both Washington and Beijing approach them to persuade Moscow to support their political agendas. In fact, Washington desires to bring Moscow closer to the US rather than leaning towards China. Perhaps the US has made serious efforts to salvage the strained relationship with the Kremlin. The question lies in how much compromise the US and the European Union, EU, can offer to Russia, and in this process, Russia may attempt to engage in a balancing act between the West and China to secure concessions from both sides. However, the long-term hopes of the Kremlin could dissipate if the US concludes that Russia and China are forming a strategic partnership to become adversaries of the US. From the beginning, the relationship between Putin and Trump has shaped international relations. It's easy to discern what President Putin desired from his counterpart, President Trump. The Russian president had many grievances against the US, but his relationships with predecessors like Barack Obama and George W. Bush were quite tense. Many believed that President Putin eagerly anticipated the victory of billionaire Donald Trump in the next US election. The Kremlin seeks the removal of sanctions imposed by the US since Russia's annexation of the Crimea Peninsula in 2014. These sanctions were further intensified by the EU amid allegations of Russia's involvement in military conflicts in eastern Ukraine, where insurgent forces were fighting for independence from Kiev. President Putin wants President Trump to acknowledge Russia's sovereignty over Crimea. Regarding Syria, in the Middle East cauldron, President Putin wants the US to abandon the goal of ousting President Bashar al-Assad. Instead, cooperation with the US in the international fight against terrorism will be sought. The way the world is divided in the new era, the Kremlin feels that Russia has the right to exert influence, especially on former Soviet states, both in Eastern and Central Europe. President Putin aims for a new version of the 1945 Yalta Agreement, in which the Soviet Union, the United States, and Britain were the three superpowers within the Allied powers, playing a decisive role in the struggle to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in World War II. The Yalta Conference led to the formation of a bipolar world order, often referred to as the Yalta Order, dividing spheres of influence among major powers within the Allied bloc after World War II. However, after the Cold War, the Soviet Union disintegrated and Russia, as the successor state to the Soviet Union in the United Nations Security Council, was regarded by the United States and the West as the defeated party. As the comprehensive crisis of the bipolar order also collapsed, a unipolar world order dominated by the United States emerged. Therefore, in January 2020, at the World Holocaust Victims Commemoration Forum, the non-governmental organization Zero Slum Israel, President Putin proposed the initiative to convene a meeting of the heads of state of the 5 permanent member countries of the United Nations Security Council to jointly address global threats to peace and security. In analysis, this proposal is referred to as the Yalta Conference Initiative. These are the kinds of initiatives that people expect from President Putin and President Trump. The press secretary of the Russian president stated that the two leaders, Putin and Trump, have a conceptual approach to foreign policy and their views that are oddly close. So, what does the US want from the meeting? It's a question that piques curiosity, but as of now, the answer remains unclear. Despite a series of tough measures, Britain hasn't contributed to explaining the support that President Trump has consistently shown for Putin during the 2016 US presidential campaign. President Putin is the only international politician whom President Trump continuously praised, even asserting that he is a stronger leader than Obama. The level of support from Trump for Putin might continue in the coming period. It's possible that President Putin will accept any concessions from Trump, then return to his more natural instincts and resist Americanization. Donald Trump's personal fondness for Putin is evident, but this affection has yet to bear fruit as the US Congress continues to pursue tough policies towards Russia and is determined not to lift sanctions. The 2020 US National Security Strategy identifies Russia and China as the top 2 current threats. US-Russia relations are unfolding in a context of disruption between cooperation and competition, but mostly in an adversarial stance. As President Putin positions Russia back on the global stage as a major player, he competes with the US to exert significant influence. However, Washington and Moscow hold differing views on their positions in the world. Russia is seeking to create a new world in which the United States is just one of many power players, no longer dominant on the international stage. Moscow is looking for recognition from Washington about its sphere of influence. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, no US administration has been willing to accept this premise. Thank you and all of you for your interest in following along. Goodbye, and see you in the next international commentary videos.
Trump loves Putin.
Says Trump is brilliant. I love that when he says I'm brilliant.
I do have a relationship with him. He is a tough cookie.
He's big, he's strong. Strong man, big, tough guy.
Putin even sent me a present. Beautiful present with a beautiful note.
He says great things about me. I'm going to say great things about him.